Chapter 1, Into the Rural. Jake Stanford knew this camping trip was about to be like no other. He didn't care about the little bullshit the members of the camp got into. He thought it was stupid. He never liked rednecks and the type of people who were his father's friends, but this weekend he had a plan. He wasn't about to stay there over the weekend without weed. A night without weed would drive his anger crazy, so he needed to find some alcohol when he got there to help him escape. In the middle of nowhere. Some rural camp near Burgettstown, PA, with nothing but a small hillbilly town and farms nearby with a broken down house or barn every now and then. The thought of not being able to have weed there terrified Jake, because then he would have to deal with the nightmares at night. Nightmares that only marijuana cured. Visions of ghosts disturbed his mind at night. Demons and the most horrific things you can think of. An eye with tentacles the size of a house coming after him in a night of sweating terror. Jake has been in trouble. Always acting out, always having to be the rebel. A bully, he's been described as by some. He's 17 and 6 feet tall. Dresses in a leather jacket and dark clothing. 6 feet tall with dark hair. He listens to punk rock music and defies his parents, police, and anyone that tells him what to do. Jake lives in Pittsburgh with his aunt, uncle, and mother. Every other weekend or so he'll stay with his dad. His parents split up years before due to his father's alcohol abuse and his mother's addiction to pills. Without a consistent father figure, Jake acted out a lot, getting into fights, experimenting with drugs like acid and marijuana. He loved marijuana that seemed to free his mind from something he felt deep inside was always haunting him. The date was July 21, 1989, and Jake had already spent most of the summer hanging with potheads and getting into fist fights at punk rock shows he attended with his friends. The most notorious fight was the one at the Black Flag show with a drunken member of a skinhead gang. The guy was sent to the hospital after Jake and his friends beat him for causing chaos and trying to throw things at Henry Rollins. His father worried about him. He thought his mother did not give a damn if the boy did anything he was told. The time had come when the father and son would go out to the father's camp. Not actually the father's camp, but a camp way out in the woods he was a member of. Jake had been there occasionally all throughout his childhood. He had good memories there playing with his cousins. His favorite memory being when he had a romantic encounter with a girl who had been brought there by his cousin Jessica. Her name was Madison. He wasn't obsessed with her, but he thought about her every time he was there and every time he thought about the camp. Goodwater Valley, Hunting and Fishing Club, also known as the Hunting Club, was where they were headed. The place was a far cry from his Pittsburgh neighborhood. This was the rural part of PA, and the farther you got out of town the more you would see broken down barns, Jesus billboards, and a shitload of Ronald Reagan signs on the lawn of every old-looking home. The radio station even switched in the truck when they got to a certain point because the broadcasting station near Pittsburgh had gotten too far out of range. His father was a hard-working man who did what he could with his carpentry skills to earn a living. He was a redneck, drinker, and hunter who had been a member of this camp for the past 20 years. As the truck started down the long dirt road in the middle of the woods, the feeling of anxiety washed over Jake. How am I gonna get weed? He kept asking himself in his mind. He knew that stuff was hard to come by out here. Gonna have to be alcohol. Everyone out there drank, and he knew he could probably sneak himself something from the clubhouse bar when people weren't looking. The truck pulled up to the gate that read with hammered on wooden all capital letters, Goodwater Valley Hunting and Fishing Club. Here, Jake, Jake's father said, holding up the keychain. Jake knew it was his job to open the gate anytime the two pulled up to camp. Jake turned the key to the lock, opened the gate, and off they went. Old memories flooded back to Jake's mind as they drove up the trail to the trailer court. In the trailer court's parking lot he saw his Uncle Sean's car there. This meant Jessica was there, and he knew if she was there Madison would be with her, and the thought of her being there made Jake's heart sink. To the left of his car was Farmer Paul's pickup truck. Farmer Paul is Jake's father's good friend and father of Alex. A younger boy who looked up to Jake and always followed him all around the hunting club. Alex was 3 years younger than Jake. Jake was starting to fear that he would be stuck watching Alex and that he would be dealing with the little fucker. He didn't want that, especially when he had no weed. He thought maybe his best decision was to go on a walk in the woods to get away from people he felt like he didn't fit in with anymore, according to him. According to him, he don't fit in with anyone there, even his own father. Chapter 2, A Walk in the Woods. Jake walked up the main trail to the upper lake. He continued down a path he once explored when he was a kid. Not having weed was starting to get to him, and his mind kept going to a negative place. He walked up a big hill now fully in the woods. He stopped at the top of the hill. He couldn't help but feel like something felt wrong. It wasn't just the fact that he didn't have weed, the woods he was in made him have a strange feeling. He started feeling lightheaded, his heart pounding. He looked across the lake and heard the loud sound of a locust, seeming like it was calling out to him. He decided to keep walking. He felt like he was a million miles away from home. It felt like he was light years from home on an alien planet. He knew what people in the camp stood for and disagreed with it. They were rednecks, and rednecks were racist, many of them were, he thought. What is bothering me, he thought. He couldn't seem to understand. Something about him changed, or something about the hunting club changed, and he couldn't figure out what it was. He continued on his walk, feeling more weird the further he went. Creepy music kept popping into his head. He got chills when he got to the shortcut that led to the old swamp, because a thought popped into his head. What if I saw a demonic figure in the distance staring at me from between the trees? Fuck this, I gotta get back, he thought to himself as he began to jog past the swamp. It was the afternoon, but the sky was getting darker. Not like the sun was going down, but the sky was an eerie glow of orange-yellow. Coyotes howled far in the distance. The light-headed feeling continued getting more intense as he got near a small dock that was over the water of the swamp. The feeling turned into a ringing in the ears that intensified until he saw something that looked like a tree trunk sticking 6 feet out of the ground. He got close to the thing. Lightheadedness and ringing gone. This ain't no tree trunk, it's a totem pole. The pole's Native American faces of hawks and other birds etched into an old carving seemed to stare at Jake. He didn't feel afraid of the pole, in fact he felt more at ease than he's felt since he left. Have I ever seen this here before? He asked himself. There are target statues of fake deer put around the camp, and he thought this could be one of those targets or decorations, but he doesn't remember it being there. Time seemed to slow down, and Jake had a brief vision of the hawk flying over the camp. The vision flying him west towards Ohio. Just slow down, just breathe, it was time to get out of the woods. He backed up from the totem pole and walked through the trail closer to the clubhouse. Going back the way he came would have taken longer, and he knew the camp well. It's time to drink something, he thought when he exited the woods and approached the pavilion. Chapter 3, The Ride. Jake walked past the pavilion to the clubhouse. All the adults were under there drinking beer and partying. It was a nice day in July, so all the adults were outside and not in the clubhouse bar where they would usually be. He went into the clubhouse through the back door. The metal door creaked open, revealing the dimly lit interior, the smell of stale beer and dust. He went into the kitchen and into the bar where the liquor cabinet was. Jack Daniels was the bottle he chose. He grabbed a Coke to use as a chaser from the clubhouse pop machine and snuck it back to the trailer court. Jake took shots and sipped the Coke inside his dad's camper that sat at the beginning of the trailer court. He began feeling buzzed fast cause he was used to weed, not alcohol. His mood began to change, feeling better but in a weird, wild way. When he looked out the window he saw his quad sitting out by the picnic table with a tarp covering it. A 1988 Honda TRX 250X. He got the keys, went out, hopped up on it and started the engine. With the sun starting to go down he sped down the dark trails, making a big dust cloud trailing behind him, speeding with his leather jacket fluttering in the wind. He got down near the gate they came in and did burnouts. Speeding down different trails. As the sun went down the trails of the camp were a blur of darkness and moonlight, the whiskey guiding his way. The wind whipped through his hair as he sped along the narrow paths. He felt alive, invincible. The ride was a wild mix of engine roars and tire squeals, the quad's headlights looking like two beams piercing the darkness. He didn't know how long he'd been riding, but he knew he'd gone farther than he ever had before. The thrill of the night was intoxicating, a powerful elixir that mixed with the whiskey in his system. While turning into a narrow path Jake didn't turn the quad until it was too late. He crashed into a bunch of branches and the abrupt turn had enough force to flip the quad. The world tilted, and the quad flipped, sending him tumbling through the air. He landed hard, the bottle smashing beside him, the smell of alcohol mixing with the earthy scent of the forest floor. He got up in a daze, the quad now wrecked and smoking. He flipped it in a very hard push back onto all four wheels. He tried starting it with no luck. Because it was dark and he was too drunk, he couldn't see what was wrong with his quad to fix it. He knew this would be a big deal. He knew his dad would kill him for this. He had to go back to the clubhouse and face his father. He stumbled back to the clubhouse, the adrenaline wearing off, leaving him with nothing but fear and the bitter taste of regret. The fight with his dad was inevitable, but he wasn't ready to face it yet. The door to the bar was open, a sliver of light spilling onto the porch. His father was sitting alone in the clubhouse bar watching the TV in the corner. When he went in, he broke the news to his father. "Dad, I had an accident on the quad," he said with his words slurred. "Why the fuck you drunk?" his dad replied back to him. "I can smell it on you from 3 feet away. First dope, now you're getting drunk and wrecking shit I bought for you." He got up from the bar and put his hand around his son's neck. Jake pushed his dad, sending him flying back. After that it was on. Jake's dad started throwing punches and Jake had his arms over his head blocking them. The two struggled in an enraged fist fight with Jake fueled by the alcohol. The fight was swift and brutal, a mixture of fists and frustration. Jake's dad was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. Each blow was a punctuation to his words of disappointment, a testament to the love he had for his son and the fear he felt for Jake's future. Jake was strong, but his dad had the experience of years behind him. Jake heard the laughs of Jessica and the familiar laugh of Madison laughing at this situation from the other room. The screen door swung open. Madison and Jessica rushed in, their eyes wide with concern. Jake's dad straightened up, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Get him cleaned up," he said, his voice softer now. "And make sure he gets some sleep." Chapter 4, The Awakening of Bogey. The cabin was a blur of activity as they cleaned him up, the sting of antiseptic on his cuts mixing with the lingering taste of whiskey. The world around him grew hazy, and the laughter of his friends seemed to echo in his head. Madison comforted Jake after the fight and wiped the blood off his mouth with a wet paper towel. Jake liked this and it made him miss his past romance with her from 2 summers ago in 1987. Then, the pipe appeared. It was carved with intricate patterns, a grinning skull with yellow eyes staring back at him. Madison offered it. Finally some weed, Jake thought, but this was no normal pipe. Earlier this day Jess and Maddie were exploring and found this inside the bottom of the abandoned archery tower. Madison took it. It was the only way of smoking the baggie of weed she brought to camp wrapped in the plastic wrapper that comes with a cigarette pack. The group took the pipe to the upper lake to smoke together on the dock. Young Alex ran up to them. Jake wanted to see young Alex hit the bowl and Alex wanted to be included when he watched the three doing this. When Alex got a glance at that pipe he thought there was something hypnotic about it that made him want to smoke with them. "Come take a puff, faggot," Jake taunted. The group sat around and smoked from the pipe. Jake was finally about to have his mind at ease. This was not the case after the first few hits. It began. The immediate feeling of something being wrong. A presence had come to the place they were staying. Something had been woken up. Smoking from this strange pipe had been a mistake, he thought. Madison seemed uneasy as well. Jake thought he saw 3 coyotes sitting in the trees across the lake. His heart dropped when he locked eyes at the sight of them. They were not normal, they had yellow shining eyes. The 3 of them seemed to watch the group, and when Jake looked away, ceased from existence. He didn't want to bring it up to the group and risk looking like some coward who couldn't handle weed, especially not in front of Madison because he could handle